All right. Hey, happy midday to everybody on the call. You true believers out there joining us from all over Texas and obviously beyond Texas. It's almost fall here in beautiful Austin, home of keeping it weird, but most importantly, the Texas Military Department. We're not just keeping it weird at Camp Mabry, we're keeping it real with this is now session 11. It's hard to believe there's been 11 sessions of this Operation Warp Drive, which is a study and discussion of writing is both a practical and professional application and growth. Of course, our great leader today, who's here and really is the pusher on this event, Colonel Hildebrandt. Sir, how are you this Thursday morning?
Doing well, Chief. Thanks for the intro.
You bet. It's been a little while. It's good to see everybody.
I know, right? But what's crazy is we do these just about once a month, and it feels like they come up on us fast, and then it feels like we haven't seen each other for a minute. It's like a weird mix between dog years and cat years, I guess. I don't know. It's kind of weird. Dogs and cats. What you got?
Well, sir, I think what we got today is a very special guest, and I'll let you tee that one up. But
yeah,
I know we've got I think we have a little smaller group than, people have different obligations today, but it's exciting to be on.
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, good afternoon, everyone, or good day. We have a very special guest today, Lieutenant General Retired Thomas S. James Jr. So I met General James as part of the mentorship program. He's with the Army's Mission Command Trainee Program, and he was the senior mentor for our commanding general, Major General Brad Bowen, and so he gets to influence a lot of people with some incredible dialogues and discussions, and so that was one of the impetuses for me inviting General James, is like just being at those warfighter events, hearing him talk leadership, hearing him talk different aspects of armor, which is his passion. If you look at his bio, you'll see he's armor through and through. He was even at the commander for the Maneuver Center of Excellence. So he has a very storied career. I'm not going to go into all the great details for you, sir, but welcome to the show. It's awesome to have you.
Well, thank you, Brian. I appreciate the opportunity. Like I said, in the Warfighter, I joined Task Force Arrowhead, and I'm a proud member. If at a distance here from South Carolina, that's where home is for me, Greenville, South Carolina. But our oldest son, Trey, who's 36, he and his wife, Gina, live in a place called Austin, down by the airport. He's a welder, and he's been to Camp Mabry one time. I did an event there when I was a FORSCOM G3, and he met me there. That's a pretty exciting area. So I'm down there every now and again, but it's a great spot. And I appreciate the opportunity to talk to the team. And I like the idea of a small group and look forward to dialogue. And I can take this pretty much anywhere you want to go as far as dialogue.
Yeah, absolutely, sir. Let me, so on the routing, we don't have everyone on the writing round table today. Sorry, stumbling with my words. But our resident AI guy, Sergeant Krause, he's out today. He's also on the border with the mission with me, but he's got a meeting he can't miss there. But we do have our other esteemed colleagues. Of course, you met CW4 Jeff Whitey. He's our band conductor for the 36 band, but he's also the radio voice and talk of the show for us. So he keeps us in line and making sure we're following the music. And then we have Mariah Gagnon, who is a Air Force attorney at Air Force JAG. So she's on today. She also has a myriad of talents. She used to be Army JAG, but I guess she saw the light and went Air Force, And then we have Major Cox, who's you've met at the Warfighter. He is the XO for the Division Artillery. And we have TJ Clifton, who is J33 for TMD. And then am I missing anyone, Matt? I can't see my full screen. Did Ellison make it on today too? And Warbrick?
Sergeant Major Warfield's on, sir. That's the only other one.
Sorry, yeah. Warfield. Sorry about that, Sergeant Major. So Sergeant Major Warfield's on. So he is also on OLS. He's one of our engineer command sergeant majors. So we try to get a diverse perspective on the writing roundtable, just kind of cover all the different bases and get the conversations moving in the right direction. So that's who we are, boss. It's you'll get a myriad of questions and dialogue from each of us. So when we introduced you to this concept, I guess a couple weeks ago, maybe I don't know, it's been a long time since Warfighter, feels longer. About a couple months ago, we talked about how Warp Drive is our program to kind of get people off the ground writing. And so writing's, it doesn't come easy to everybody. And so we're wanting to kind of pick your brain about what ideas you have for some of our aspiring writers, whether it comes to topics, picking a good topic to write about, or just kind of going through the process. So anything that you can share from your perspective. I know you've been around a minute. You probably had some key leaders that have developed you and helped you get some stuff out the door. So, kind of, I guess, first question out the door, boss, is, what do you think about the writing process, and how do you kind of get into a mindset where you feel like you can really crank on something and get something out the door?
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Brian. And I may wander a little bit here in my initial point because I want to talk about a few things. Just
Sure.
for the group, I think most of you know my background. I don't know if you saw my bio and you heard what Brian said up front, but I have a special passion and place in my heart for the Army National Guard. My last assignment in the Army was First Army, and I was in that position for 3 years. And so I really got to understand the challenges and the dynamics that y'all juggle every day. So I want to start out by thanking all of you for your service and for your leadership and for what you do for the Army. It's interesting, Brian, as you talk about chief there, it's kind of like my metaphor, one band, one sound, that I use in academics and as well at the Warfighter. It's so important when we think about this great task force that I have such an affection for. So I wanted you to know that up front. And so when I retired from the Army, Jim Rainey, who was the CAT commander, called me and asked me to join the MCTP program to be a senior mentor. And one of the highlights was because of my connection from First Army with the National Guard divisions. And so I said, absolutely, I'd love to do it. I love the program and I love the Guard. So let's do that. So I did it, but I did the part-time program. So I only do 1 or 2 warfighters a year. I do the academics build up to those, as you well are aware. And I also am a senior mentor for ASAP-C, which is the course that transitions general officers to 2-star level commands, whether it be a sustainment equivalent or whatever. And it's a very special thing for me. I think I've done 6 of them. And it really talks to the senior leaders of the Army, talk to these 1- and 2-star generals as they go into command. So I get to stay kind of current with the Army. The other thing I do is I'm a full-time employee with Valiant, and I run an HST, a higher support team that focuses on really helping National Guard brigades train, whether it be MDMP and the associated pieces of the ops process or CRXs. And I was telling Matt earlier, one of our customers that we were supporting was the 56th IBCT up at Fort Hood for their annual training. But I understand that is not going to go the way it was originally going to happen, and that's fine. We're agile and adaptive as we go forward. But I wanted you to know my background as I go forward. And Brian had mentioned I commanded at the Maneuver Center of Excellence. I was the Armor Commandant. Walt Pyatt was the Infantry Commandant, and Bob Brown was the Maneuver Center Commander. And so that a lot of what I did with the Armor Force was I was the 46th Chief of Armor and the first Armor Commandant to do my full tour duty at Benning, because we had pulled the force from Fort Knox into that position and created the Maneuver Center, which I think is very, very important. And so Armored Cav background, but generals, I did go to the School of Advanced Military Studies at Leavenworth, and it was a unique year for me. I learned a heck of a lot from the academics that taught the courses, but primarily from the students, because we had a really diverse population of folks with experiences that really taught me a lot. I did 2 monographs. I think Matt said you dug one of them up. Not necessarily proud of either one of them. I had to defend both of them in orals, and it was a challenge. But it was, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, if that makes sense to you. Oh, yeah. My wife will tell you that I'm a much better oral communicator than I am a written communicator. And when it's something very important, she goes, don't type an email, call them. But there's a combination of things. And so with that introduction, there were a couple of things that I wanted to talk to you about. First off, I really applaud this effort. This whole idea of renewal of the profession through writing, I think is hugely important, because I really believe that leader development is our secret sauce, and which makes us the greatest armed force and military in the world. I mean, we have high-speed combat systems, but it's the leaders that are able to make decisions that I think is hugely important. And a large of that is through professional discourse. And I think that's very, very important. I highlighted a couple things you sent to me, Brian. One of them really resonated with me: how passion fuels our work. Because I think you've got to have a passion. When you join the profession of arms, it's very important. You're a very small part of our population, and never before has such a large responsibility rested on the shoulders of so few. So I appreciate your aggressiveness in trying to pursue this. But what I wanted to start out with, when we talk about writing and communicating, both oral and written, I wanted to start off with the Chief of Staff of the Army's priorities. You know, he talks to ASAP every time we do the course, but I did see him a couple weeks ago. I went to the maneuver center, the maneuver conference at the Maneuver Center, and he spoke and reiterated his priorities of warfighting, delivering ready formations, continuous transformation, and the last one is strengthening the profession, which is part of what you're doing right here. And I think that that's hugely important. Somebody asked him, what did he consider the biggest risk for the Army? And his response was not being able to transform quick enough before the next fight. And so I know that, especially with the focus of this program, you've been keeping an eye on the Russo-Ukraine war. And I think that's a very important laboratory for us to learn a lot as we shape forward. But there were a couple of things I wanted to highlight about it. One of the things they taught us in SAMS, and I'm sure you're pretty familiar with, is that the nature of warfare doesn't change, but the character does. And right now we are seeing the character of warfare changing based on the multi-domain operations, but primarily autonomy and our drone warfare and our ground autonomous systems and how they're employed on the battlefield, and how the Ukrainians and the Russians are adapting often within 24 to 48 hours after contact. And I think that that's something that we got to learn about. And, you know, the electromagnetic spectrum, we had a lot of conversations about this in your warfighter. We can't afford to have Taj Mahal command posts anymore. We can't afford to have, what do you call them? Digital running watches on your wrist in your headquarters, because then everybody will die. I mean, that's the consequence of it. So we really got to adapt and learn. But on the other side of that, one of the things that's very important, and I know that General Rainey, Futures Command Commander, highlights this, is let's don't learn bad lessons, because the Ukrainians don't necessarily have some of the stuff we have at echelon and all domains to employ. So they have to rely on drones more than maybe another country that has a larger military and more resources might have. I still think it's important that we learn from it, but I think the integration thereof is very important. I had a question. I did a radio interview yesterday, and they asked me, it says, so I guess drone warfare has made the tank obsolete. And so, you know, the hair on the back of my head, this starts up as a tank or armor cav guy. But that is a valid question. It really is. But, you know, if you look back to World War II and the Blitzkrieg, we got Air Force, we got precision munitions, especially fires guys like yourself understand that we can deliver some things on the battlefield that the Ukrainians just don't have access to. They're very good at what they do. So we can learn from that, but we got to combine it with what's capable. What do we have? And I think autonomy, a great example of that is we don't want first contact to draw blood. We want to have systems that will be able to shape the fight to allow us to maneuver appropriately. And so I think I wanted to say that up front as we kind of talk through these things. Yeah. And leader development was the other piece that I wanted to highlight, and I believe it's our secret sauce. And, you know, we talk a lot about the three mutually supportive domains: institutional, operational, and self-improvement and self-development. And how do those all connect? And I can see through this warp project that you have, Warp Drive, you kind of have all three going on. And so I think that's very, very important that we study the profession and we learn from it and we write about it. But part of writing is also reading and reading some of the things that are out there that could help shape that. And one of the other points I wanted to make is open and honest communication, both orally and written, is foundational to the approach of mission command. And I remember when we first linked up at Academics talking to Brad Bolin about that and about how do you drive the operations process through commander's guidance, commander's intent, and making decisions, and how do you articulate these? And I talked to Matt earlier in our sound check, and I wanted to share with you, and I may have talked to you about it before, Brian, but Brad had that legal pad, and he would always just want a few, like 15 to 20 minutes to gather his thoughts, and he would write them out. And then that's his written guide, but then he was an oral communicator because you could really detect and understand emotion. And I think emotion is important both verbally and in writing. I remember reading Schwarzkopf's book where they said he yelled all the time. So when he had to yell, nobody knew the difference. And so I think that that's a valuable lesson to kind of think about in your tone of how you verbally communicate, but in your tone in writing as well. I had a boss, General Kukalo, that used to say, how can you master the emotionless argument? Because, sometimes people can get so emotional about something, you'll lose your audience, you'll shut them off. So how do you kind of articulate that and be able to kind of build your point appropriately? And so what I did is I said, what are the 3 or 4 or 5 things I could give you related to writing to think about as you kind of go forward? And the first one, it relates to a book. I don't know if y'all have had a chance to read General Petraeus's book, Conflict. It's Conflict, the Evolution of Warfare from 1945 to Ukraine. And it was by General David Petraeus and Andrew Roberts, the British historian. And I thought it was very good, but he has a construct, General Petraeus does, that he says you got to get the big idea right. And then you have to be able to articulate to your formation and audience, whether it be military or not, articulate that big idea. And then you got to constantly review the big idea to see if it's still the right big idea. And so in writing, I think getting the big idea and the bottom line, the thesis statement, what you want to support is critically important to writing. And it's got to be, generally right. General Dave Perkins was the CAC commander when I was the Mission Command Center of Excellence director. And he used to always say, what problem are we trying to solve? Yeah. And so I found myself spending a lot of energy figuring out what the problem was. And I would always, how you do mission analysis, and I know y'all have 2 versions, you got part 1, part 2. My part 1 of mission analysis was just going and saying, this is my problem statement. And inevitably I got it wrong. And I thought I was pretty damn close and had some smart people looking at it. So my thought to you is take the time to get the big idea right that you're going to write about and make sure that you can support it with the associated pieces.
Yeah, that's really good, sir. I think, what is it? Einstein said if you give him 100 days to solve a problem, he'll take 99 to get the problem right, and then 1 day to actually get the solution. Yeah, or something like that. But
that was you're 100% right. I was thinking about it. Yeah, when I was saying it. Yeah, right.
Yeah. I mean, so just recently we've been using we have a lot of problem sets here on OLS, but I'm a big fan of operational design, like and the Army design methodology. And so I like to take the staff through the big idea. What's the big idea? And that helps to kind of, because if you think about it, a thesis statement is just in Army design methodology is really gap analysis. Where are we now? Where do we want to be? All right. And so your thesis is you're making that argument, like to your point, hey, what problem are we trying to solve? Yeah, I love that. That's awesome. I am going to pick up that book. Is that new? Did he write that recently?
Yeah, it's not too old. I think about a year or 2.
Okay.
And I may be off on that, Brian, but it's very good. And some of the things I like to do when I'm doing PT, I'll use Audible. And the thing that's interesting about Audible is General Petraeus narrates the chapter on Iraq and Afghanistan. And so having been there during the time frames that he was commander, I kind of had some aha moments. So that's why we did what we did.
Yeah.
He
Cool.
talks about it. And I think it's a book worthy of reading. And I got a couple others that I'll tell you about, because you were talking about people that I work for that are great writers. Well, Petraeus was one, but the other one was H.R. McMaster.
Mm-hmm.
So he was the Maneuver Center of Excellence commander during the last 90 days of my time as the Armor Commandant. And I'll tell you, I never, ever survived first contact writing with him. Sometimes it'd be 10 or 15 iterations. And I'd get an email at 3 a.m. that says, "Hey, Tom, I've been reading this thesis about the German army in 1940, whatever, and we can use this in the Army School." I'm like, oh my goodness, sir. But it was a great experience, and he's got some good books out there. I find his reading a little bit difficult to navigate, but I've got Battlegrounds and a couple others, and Dereliction of Duty. But so the first one was get the big idea right. The next one was look at things from other than your position. It's easy for us to have this personal bias. And so when you're looking at a problem, say, okay, so what does this look like to somebody else? Because it may look a whole lot different than it looks to me. And I find that can be something that can help you kind of frame a problem or a solution as you think through it, look into it. The other one is clarity. General Perkins used to have a quote, "Don't lose clarity in pursuit of accuracy." And I may have shared that in the AARs, Brian, or in the academics, but it's true, because you can get so detailed that you can suck the big point that you want to make out of it. And so what is about the right amount to do that? I'm a big believer in storytelling. I think stories make things really interesting and bring a reader into it, and giving examples to make your point, so that somebody can say, well, I got your point, but I'm not sure if I agree. But the story may either sell them on it, or maybe it'll open up more thought. So I just,
Two observations on that, sir. So I was thinking, when you said don't lose clarity in pursuit of accuracy, what I called to mind is, I've heard that we've heard this phrase, I'm showing you the forest, but you keep staring at the trees. Yeah. Right. Yeah. And so you kind of, sometimes it's hard to take a step back and take a look at the big picture. And then it kind of goes with that catchphrase also, where you sit is how you see, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you can't pull back and see the wider open aperture of what you're trying to tackle, then as you go, like to your point of even an oral argument or a written argument, you're making a point in a thesis or a paper, like you have to consider the other perspectives. People are going to challenge you. You can't just have a straw man argument. Your thesis is going to impact. What's the impact of your thesis as you make the things? How can you anticipate some of the dialogue that comes out from your thesis and address those points early on, so you get kind of first dibs in that sense of saying, hey, I've established my position, I can defend my position. Now what's the counterpoints that could be made? So I really love that. That's good.
Yeah,
and I have heard you say it before, but it's always resonated with me. So keep saying it, sir. I think it's important for people to hear that.
Yeah. No, I think that those are powerful examples. And the last couple is getting to the point, and that has to do with clarity. And then the last one I had was follow an outline or a path, so that a reader. I've read books that have been hard to follow and books that have been really easy to follow. A couple examples that I thought about was, I don't know if you've read any General Stan McChrystal, because he's got an ops background. I've read Team of Teams, My Share of the Task, but the recent one that I just finished was on character. And I thought that was quite interesting, because he does a little bit of open sharing about the situation that got him essentially had to resign out of Afghanistan with President Obama, and just the idea of how do you look at things through his character. And, I also like David Brooks. I don't know if you've read much of David Brooks, and he's really good. The one that I'm reading right now is How to Know a Person, because I think it's really important to understand people if you're going to write or you're going to orally communicate. Know your audience. No, that's another big one that I was going to highlight, and how you do that. And he talks about how in conversation they're illuminators and they're diminishers. And diminishers are those that want to dominate a conversation and really don't care what you're saying and just want you to stop so that they can say something else. Yeah. And then illuminators know how to bring out the ideas and bring out the best in people. You know, the old saying, why God gave you 2 ears and 1 mouth.
Yeah.
You know, and listening skills are just crazy important. And it's not that easy. You know, I think I'd shared with you maybe in one of the ARs that we had the mindfulness trainers come down to Benning, and they were talking about how the human body's built. So if I'm talking to you, Brian, my brain is automatically going to think about what I got to do later today or what I did yesterday that I got to fix or do something differently. And I'm not thinking about what I'm saying to you right now. And you got to focus yourself to be able to do that. And that's why when I was kind of growing up as a leader in the Army, I used to think what I want to do is ask 1 or 2 questions about what somebody's telling me to keep me focused on what they're telling me. As opposed to some bosses, you say, yeah, come on, finish so I can talk some more. You know,
I'm bad with names, sir. So oftentimes when someone introduces their name, I have to say their name out loud so I remember names. So especially when I'm out of uniform, I can't use the name tape cheat. You know.
Yeah, and as you get older, that's not easier, Brian.
Yeah,
I tell you.
Yeah.
That's why I say sir and ma'am most of the time.
That's right. It's an easy go-to. Speaking of illuminators, so I don't want to control all your time here. This is a running roundtable, and I fall into this bad habit of talking a lot and not letting these guys get in. So I know we worked up in advance. Some of these guys have some questions for you, and because they're highly interested in what you have to say too. I kind of talked you up a little bit. I'm not going to lie. So you got some high expectations.
Oh,
but
no,
I'm sure
man.
you're going to deliver.
Oh,
yeah. So I'll start off with Sergeant Major Warbrick. Sergeant Major Warbrick, what you got, brother? Hey, Sergeant Major, you out there? Maybe we lost him. Okay. All right. Hey, man, I'm having trouble seeing the rest of my. Oh, there you guys are. I was gonna say I'm having trouble seeing the rest of my screen.
I'm here, sir. You got me?
Okay. Yeah. Oh, go ahead, Sergeant Major. We can hear you.
Yes. So I had a question. Being a student, how important do you think professional writing is for those in terms of influencing doctrine, culture, and leadership development?
Yeah, that's a heavy one there, boss.
I think it's a very good one. Thanks, Sergeant Major, for that question, because you know the doctrine is kind of a way. It's a general trying to sync the language of the Army so that we talk the same way, but it's not necessarily prescriptive, so that you can adjust off of it. That's what's so good about it. That's why we have concepts that feed into doctrine over time. And so feedback from the field to adjust through military writing. I mean, it's those folks on the ground that are going to shape futures. And, you know, Jim Rainey, and you'll hear me say a couple things that, because I like the way he articulates things, that warfare is always going to end up being a clash between infantry on the ground, that last 100 yards, no matter how fancy it gets before that, it's always going to clash. And so at the lowest level and at echelon, we need to be able to use writing to help shape doctrine and TTPs to share with the Army. It goes back to how do we adapt quicker than the rate of change, if that makes sense, because you know the Army's process is so crazy that we'll be thinking about things 10 years down the road that should have happened 10 years earlier. And we got to be able to adapt quicker. And it goes to my comment about the Russo-Ukraine war. They're changing often within 24 to 48 hours. And so I think being able to write about what we're seeing and how we can adapt. And, you know, with the Guard, it's so important because y'all have such an enormous experience in civilian jobs that could impact on the battlefield that maybe a full-time active duty soldier wouldn't see, you know, especially when it comes to electromagnetic spectrum and how we do certain things. And, you know, your division was so good at leveraging the Star Shield and able to really talk. I had somebody ask me, have you ever seen a division be able to go through a whole warfighter on tactical comms? I said, I just had one.
Yeah.
And so those kinds of things I think are very important. Culture is huge, Sergeant Major. I think that's very important. I think I like to quote the book Zarwicki, Wisdom of the Crowds, and because I think it's so important. And his thesis in that book is that the group is always smarter than the smartest person in the group because of diversity of thought, experience, background, and all of those kinds of things. If you can pull it all, harness the energy of all of that together as a collective group, you're that much better. And that's why your commander can't go off into a room and write a 5-paragraph op order on his own. He's got to be informed by a diverse group of warfighting function experts and those kinds of things. And so that cultural thing, I think, is important. How do you write that? And how do you see it because we're constantly changing, and we got to be able to adapt, and we got to be able to see the environment to be able to do that. And so discourse, both on doctrine and culture, and then the leader development one, like I told you, I think that's our secret sauce. I think because we really can look at ourselves critically. Did Vladimir Putin really think that he was going to be able to take Ukraine in 3 days, pack your fancy uniform so we can celebrate in Kyiv? Yeah, okay, not so much. Because, and I think it's because they don't have a professional non-commissioned officer corps. Nobody can tell the emperor he doesn't have clothes. And so I really think the discourse to develop leaders, I think, is important. And it's to share ideas. A quick example, if I got time for it. Yeah. When I was a captain in Aschaffenburg, Germany, I was a brigade plans officer. My boss had me I went to Leavenworth for CAS Cube. I don't know if you all know what that is. I mean, that was a long time ago, 1988 or 89. But I was tasked to go to call and get a VCR tape of a guy by the name of Fred DeBella. Fred DeBella was an armored task force battalion commander out of Fort Carson, and he had gone out to the National Training Center and defeated decisively the OPFOR 9 out of 9 times while maintaining over 70% combat power. It's never been done in history, and I don't think it's ever been done since. Wow. And so everybody's like, how the hell did he do this? Well, he was a West Point football player, and he went out to Pinyon Canyon. First off, they had unlimited resources. They trained their butts off. But they had a playbook that was much driven like the Army wishbone option offense. And so they could finish each other's sentences. And so what he did was he really focused on leader development and the idea that if you're an alpha company and you're an officer and you come up with a good idea, you get a C. If you share it with other companies, you get a B. If you share it with everybody in the battalion, you get an A. And so this idea of writing leader development and sharing things that we've learned across the Army, Call has this thing. What is it called? The Quick Fire Channel. Have you heard about that? And Brian, see, that's what we got to do, because people are thinking of all kinds of cool stuff. 101st did 2 brigade rotations down at JRTC, trying to figure out after they've transformed and how to use Raspberry Pis and all these things to make their seat. How do you hide in plain sight? How, what's the old saying? You don't want to be a needle in a haystack. You want to be a needle in a pile of needles. Yeah. And so how do you do that? And so that's where I think, and that's a long answer to your question, Sergeant Major. Doctrine, culture, and leader development can hugely be impacted by writing and discourse.
Well, and to tie back, I think a common theme that's come up into this too, boss, is that, it takes courage to do that. If Stan McChrystal wrote a book about character, imagine the courage it takes to go on the line and maybe, I haven't read it, but imagine like what it takes to kind of just own things, right? Own things out in the open, what it takes to kind of push an idea out there that's out of the box thinking, what it takes to, it's the courage that it's going to take courage to kind of get something on paper and like, hey, you know what? I'm going to have to be subject to the editors here, and I may fail, but guess what? I'm going to be better for it by having trying. So I think, that's one of the things we take out of this too, is absolutely culture. How do we fit into doctrine? You talked about the 3 domains of learning in the Army. I would offer there's a 4th domain, basically technology, and not to say technology is in essence, a piece of machinery, but at one point in time, the pencil was technology, right? And so technology always has to kind of be in our mind and how we weave that in. But I digress down a rabbit hole. Sorry about that. I'm a big technology fan. I know. I bet Chief Lightsey's got something on his mind. He looks
Hey,
like he's ready to.
wait a minute. I thought you were like the analog map guy at the Warfighter. You talking about technology now? What's up?
I will tell you, I do like both. Look, I even maintain
sir.
this on
Get him, sir.
OLS. You got to have both. It can't be analog or digital. It's got to be both. And like we're learning that with like some property accountability stuff, right? Like, hey, we're teaching young soldiers how to be more accountable for property, and we're trying to enhance their idea, because you have the young folks that just want to look at their phone and say, hey, let me just do all these digital hand receipts. And then you have the old folks like us. It's like, I want everything in paper. Well, it's kind of got to be both. And I think that's a very pedestrian example, but you got to have both. It can't be one at the expense of the other. Yeah.
I think they need to complement each other. I concur wholeheartedly. Yeah, Roger.
Yeah. All right, Chief.
Well, if you're older and you're wearing glasses like these, there's a couple people on this call that are. You still want to see the property, sir, right? Let's lay it out and let's put our hands on it.
Yeah.
So, hey, sir, not as many questions about just some of the stuff that you brought up. Adapt quicker than the rate of change. I think with Colonel Hildebrandt, at the same time, in our unit, we joke about guard time, and since you've got quite a bit of experience with guard, when I tell my group as we're training, hey guys, you've got two days to have this ready, or this has to be ready in one day. And they said, well, Chief, it's not until next month or 2 months away. Well, that's how much you have in training time. That's how much you have in preparation time with all these other things in between. Mm-hmm. And then of course the kind of jumping in akin to that, in my view, is the vertical, down and up communication that has to happen to adapt ahead of that rate of change. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, we joke about guard time, and guard time is so different. And then you get into a warfighter, you get into an AT, and you can do things much more quickly, and you can see how that speeds up and slows down. OLS has been as Colonel Hildebrandt would know, has been a test of all these things. How do you adapt in real time with contact? How do you adapt with soldiers who aren't used to being on, and leaders in non-organic units and all that? So this is, what you're saying brings that up. And I would like just in your reading, this isn't really a question, but we deal, and I'm just quoting you, team is greater than the sum of its parts. I mean, I think we're still in we're dealing with that all the time, and because the parts change, but how do we overcome whether it's organic unit or a unit that comes together for a special mission as all these changes occur. And you mentioned West Point, so I'm just gonna say this. I was up at West Point not too long ago, and sat in and listened to their band, which is, in my view, is a special band, as we call it. And their issues, while with a different level sort of player and how that works, are very similar to my issues. How do you make that group, that team, greater than the sum of its parts? So those are little things you brought up, and I just find that stuff fascinating. So,
hey, Chief, I think those are all great points, and I just like to highlight a couple of them. I don't know if y'all know Sergeant Major Schroeder. He retired as the Command Sergeant Major of FORSCOM, and he was the FORSCOM Command Sergeant Major when I was a 3 up there, and I consider him to be a great leader and mentor of mine. And one of the things he told me, and you've probably seen this other places, that there's no such thing as time management. The idea that time is continuous, what you manage is energy along a time continuum that you can never stop. And so how do you manage that energy? And the challenge I had at First Army, and I think that the total force needs to understand the time challenges of Compo 2 and 3. It's that way because we decided it's going to be that way, and we resourced it that way. And so time being a huge resource. So how do we manage that energy and maximize every opportunity we get together to be able to do things? And I think OLS was a good example. I think like Brian was talking about when we were doing the sound check, he was doing some stuff on the border and leveraging technology to be able to do that. How can we leverage that to also inform and develop our LISCO skills as we think about any opportunity to do things that way. You know, what I tell units when I do an active division or a guard division, how can you take the warfighting ops process, things that you do, and integrate them into what you do on steady state ops, whether it be a couple of days a month or a full month. It all depends, but you want to try to structure things as if you're fighting all the time so that you can be able to leverage those skills, if that makes sense.
Yeah, 100%. And I think too, to kind of, ad lib and riff on both y'all's conversation here is, like, we don't get to train 2 days a month, right? Or 4 days a month, whatever that drill is for that month. How does that make us better? Because we now have a constraint that we have to deal with. And I think if you look back and we talk about innovation, innovation is not just technology. It's we can innovate processes. We can innovate how we build our teams. And so that's what it's going to get to when we do these things, is that we realize these constraints are going to make us be more creative, make us be more innovative. And then the backside of that, and this goes back to the writing program, the renewal of the profession, is, okay, we figured something out. Awesome. Well, how are we sharing that? How are we going to get that A, that B, that C that you referenced before? How are we going to get that out to the field? And I think, writing is a big part of that. So,
Hey, Brian, real quick to reinforce something you just said. One of the things I highlighted to the chief the other day is that we got to not just transform systems and formations, but we got to transform the operations process. Exactly what you talked about. So how do we do that? How can we turn a 8-hour war game in 30 minutes leveraging technology? So that you can say, okay, now let's change the conditions and run that again. And then 30 more minutes, you've got something that you can compare and contrast. And so, Roger. And I think that's a great thing to write about, because I think it's, we talk about people, systems, process when we were talking about your warfighter, and the process can adapt too. You're absolutely right. And you talked about, you mentioned design methodology. And I don't know if you know, we went to Israel and got to meet Nave and who kind of came up with that idea, and Uba Vastasega and those. And they're just a bunch of big brains. But yeah, I think those are all, how do we leverage those processes to be more effective? How do we modify them as required and leverage technology to do so?
Yeah. All right. I think, let's see. T, did you have your hand up?
Sir, you say that again? You're cutting out a little bit.
Is that static coming from me, guys? I heard
It
static.
is, sir.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll mute myself. But TJ, over to you, buddy.
Hey, sir. TJ Clifton here. I do want to just emphasize, when you talked about time and how it's continuous, one of the things I was listening to, and one of the things I tell our son is, when you say you didn't have time to do something, you need to rephrase that and say, I chose not to do it with the time I had. Because that's essentially what we're doing, is choosing what we're going to do and not do with the time. One of the questions I had is, based off of your experience, were there certain exposures or assignments that you had where you saw a significant increase in your ability to write, to convey whatever messages you were trying to convey?
Wow. That's a great question, TJ. Before I go there real quick, though, I think that's a great point that you made with your son, and the idea of time management, and it's really energy management, et cetera. I had a boss, and this probably is one of the situations that you're asking about. I was the SIG chief, or we call it the chief of the command planning group for the TRADOC commander, when I was just before going into brigade command. And I was down at Fort Monroe when TRADOC was there and not at Eustis. And my boss was General William Wallace, and not the Braveheart Wallace, but he was the former 5th Corps commander that led all forces into Iraq. But I learned a lot from him, because he was one that didn't say a lot, but when he did, it was like an E.F. Hutton moment, where you would just really want to listen to him. And one of the things he said is that organizations, and I think this works for Guard or it doesn't matter what compo, organizations exist headquarters exists to look deep, to prioritize, and then based on that priority, resource, and then empower subordinates to be able to get after it. And so I think that empowerment, although it's last, I think it's probably the most important, because if you give, the power of purpose, give an organization or a small group or a leader a purpose, then let them figure out how to get there as long as they're within commander's intent. So I think that's very important. So the ones that, I was a planner a lot of times. Just to share it with you, I was the brigade, division, and corps planner for the same commander, which was really cool. Jim Riley, I was his brigade plans captain in the brigade S3 shop during Desert Shield and Storm. And we were the advance guard of 1st Armored Division. We fought the Republican Guard for 3 days. But what I did is I had to listen to him give guidance, and then I had to translate that into orders, which, it could be operational orders, but it could also be a written paper. We had to inform the Army on what we learned during Desert Storm. And so I had to write some things for him there. So that was one example. And then as a division planner in 3rd Division, when he was division commander, we did a warfighter sequence, and then I ended up leaving before the division deployed to OIF-1, and it was at 5th Corps, and we actually designed the plan for OIF at 5th Corps level, but then it was modified significantly by Secretary Rumsfeld. Y'all may be familiar with him, and so he kind of upped that timeline so they didn't use all the forces that we had planned for. So planning operationally, those were some of the things that I learned about from writing. But I also learned a heck of a lot about leader development when I was at the Mission Command Center of Excellence. So if y'all aren't familiar with that, the Mission Command Center of Excellence is at Fort Leavenworth. It's subordinate to the Combined Arms Center, but it is a center of excellence. And so I was responsible, had oversight for the Center for Army Leadership and for the Center for Army Profession and Ethic up at West Point. They've combined them now. It's called CAPEL, which is Profession, Ethic, and Leadership. And so that was a great experience for me to learn and really to have an opportunity to write and kind of think through how we do those things. Because we were writing at the time the Leader Development FM. And so that was a key component of what I did there. And so I hope those helped. Oh, one other thing that I thought of when you were talking is there's an old saying, we got to figure out how to do more with less, which I think is a horrible quote. I think we got to figure out what's essential and do it with less, if that makes sense. Because that's too much. How much can we spread it so thin that we can't do the key things? And this goes back to really thinking about the problem before you try to solve it. What are the key things we need to get done if all else fails? And so I hope that helped.
Yes, sir. That was good. I was just going to mention, I don't know if you know retired Major General Arlen Royalty.
Royalty?
Royalty.
Yeah. Name sounds familiar. What?
He's over in your neck of the woods in South Carolina. He's my dissertation chair.
No kidding.
Yes, sir.
Huh.
Yeah.
I'll be darned. Do you know what town?
I'll have to follow up with him. I can get with Matt and we'll get that to you. But yeah, he's in your area.
Okay.
I think Colonel Hildebrand's having some technical.
All right. Sorry about that, folks.
There he is.
There you go. You're up now.
Did you see that? It was like, yeah, that was crazy. I'm sure I had my camera on. I was just trying to fix it, and then it started spinning sideways like I was stuck in a washing machine.
It's the Russians, man. They're after you. Yeah. They got you, Brian.
Well, I tell you, sir, building on what TJ said, and just what you're bringing back to us too, is that I'm actually working with my XO is going to he's going to move up into my position when I either retire or something else happens here soon. So, but we're having these constant discussions about what's essential on the training schedule, is the key document, because it shows our priorities. So sort of what you're talking about, whether it's training schedule or application of, these are the 70% markers we've got to get to, and everything else has to occur during that end day, that month that we're not here as leaders. What's essential, as you said, what's essential, what's not essential, and how do we bring the manage the energy for everybody to get it there. So
Yeah.
This is a great reinforcing conversation on how do we break down that training schedule to make sure, with a group of people in discussion, right, a small staff of that we're not spinning our wheels on something that really isn't going to affect our mission or isn't a priority. So This is great.
I think that is a great point.
Appreciate it.
I just thought of something else that it goes back to knowing your audience. We really got to understand the whole generational thing too. We talk, when I was in First Army, we used to say fit meant fit for the rigors of multi-domain combat. And that meant physical, mental, emotional, spiritual. And then I had the chief of chaplains tell me, you need to add social, because, when we were trying to fight a suicide issue that we had in the 7th Division when I commanded out JBLM. And I was talking to this expert that had come in, and we were trying to figure it out. And when I described the problem and how I was getting after it, he looked at me and goes, "Sir, you got this all wrong, because you're looking at it through a 50-year-old lens." Mm-hmm. And so so what we did is we built these control groups of folks that were represented that demographic that were committing suicide, so that we could figure out how to communicate and what we were missing. Right. And it certainly helped. I wish it had helped more, because we had way more than then it just ripped my heart out. But you know the deal. But the idea is, how do we understand the generation that's coming up in the Army, especially like if I'll be 62 in October. Man, I could miss some things. And so how do I stay current, I guess, is what I'm trying to tell you.
Well,
go ahead, Chief.
No, and you mentioned bringing in people, those points of view, from a standpoint of a commander at any level, at any echelon, it's easy to become insulated internally, and having really engaging with your staff. That's still a challenge for some leaders, and really listening to those points of view and being in that moment to take, hey, here's the grain. That's exactly right. How do I connect? And there are people in positions that can help do that. But if you turn the ears off, there's no way to do it. And in my other side of the profession, we talk about that the expert is the person from out of town. Right. Yeah. So, you could say the same things over and over again in different ways. But if somebody comes in and you have a guest that comes in and listens, and you disengage, as you said, step away from it for a second, those people are going to really engage with them. And you've got to be open to that experience, in getting that perspective, I guess.
Chief, I think that's a great point. If everybody's thinking the same way, nobody's thinking. I forget who said that quote, but I think it's
sounds like groupthink, right? Yeah, you just said it, sir. We're gonna write.
You did it, sir.
We're gonna attribute it to Tom James. Did that right there.
I don't know.
I'm using technology, this pencil, as Colonel Hill.
Yeah, there you go.
Right.
There you go.
That's
Chief.
Right. Hey, sir. Stepping back a little bit, trying to connect some dots. I think with our conversations.
Yeah.
You've mentioned a lot of things that you're reading, and this kind of makes me think about research for writing, right? Mm-hmm. If you're a writer, you got a topic, how do you get after some of this research? Obviously you're an advisor to senior leaders. You have to stay abreast of the most cutting edge ideas, most innovative technology. You want to stay relevant, right? How do you tackle research for your career in a sense? And then how do you kind of, if you had to apply that to writing and kind of getting after and help some of these aspiring writers, like, hey, go dig in here. What kind of tips or ideas do you have for these guys to kind of get after it?
Yeah, I tell you, Brian, that's a great question. And I don't know that I have a really good answer. I'm still I go online and search things. I'm trying to remember. I'm just looking at my list of books that I've read. The one that Robert Meacham. Are you familiar with him?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a fictional writer, right?
Well, yeah, I read his book about Lincoln. So one of the things
Maybe not.
So I think I got the wrong person here. Let's hold tight. It'll take me 2 seconds. But as far as research and how do we leverage things like the chat TPT and those things, but what he was saying is John Meacham. It's the book I read was And There Was Light. It's about Abraham Lincoln. And I wanted to study Abraham Lincoln and Ronald Reagan just to kind of keep my political balance, I guess, if that makes any sense. But one of the things he said was that what would take him in a library to research old documents would take 2 to 3 weeks. He could do in an hour now, leveraging technology. It just based on the search.
Sure.
I did a board with OSD not too long ago where we had thousands of pages of documents we had to review, and we hired a company that could go in and do search words for us that I thought was fascinating. This was all about Wounded Knee and how you just like punch in a word and then it would show, and it was relatively effective. But the idea is, and I think I like this that you sent me and the stuff that you use to shape this program. And the idea is you want to be careful because I know I talked to the provost of the Citadel. That's where I went to college, and they're struggling right now with plagiarism and using AI to write papers and do those kinds of things. So there's a fine line between using it for research and having it do your work. If that makes sense. I just read an article this morning from Harvard Business Review talking about AI creating work slop, where people they use it to write their papers, and actually it transfers the burden of creation onto the reader, who actually now has to go fact check everything. But to your point, research, right? And AI, I love AI. And if our guy Jared Krause was here, he's our AI guy. We call him R&D, research and development. That guy is all about AI. He knows his stuff, right? I know he's working on a paper right now for Substack, writing an article on how to use AI. And his thing is, and he's probably I may not get it right, but he's really good. So he's talking about prompt engineering. How do you engineer the best prompt for your AI? Because all the AI out there right now is generative AI. And if you think about in concept what generative AI does for you, it creates. So it likes to take a lot of poetic license, right, with its creation, and so you have to, with your prompt engineering, Jared's argument is basically you have to teach it, right? You have to give it, say, hey, act like you're an S3 operations officer for a infantry brigade combat team, ... using Army doctrine, using Army regulations, define for me 3 courses of action for a scenario similar to Task Force Smith defense, whatever, right? And so it's the prompt that has to get after it. But I will tell you too, my observation is I'm kind of old school like this. It's the whole analog digital thing. I still kind of like the Dewey Decimal System. I like going to the library, because you look something up on the shelf and you go to pull that book, and then what's right next to that book? All the other books that you didn't see because your search narrowed them out. And you're like, oh, there is a lot of work on this subject. Oh, wow, there's this book and this book. And you can actually see how big the books are. And you're like, hey, this book looks pretty thick, so they must have done a lot of writing on this topic. And so I think it's a good mix. One can't be sacrificed for the other. So these are all excellent points. Yeah, no, I think those are good. And here's the deal with AI though too. When we talk to the provost, she says that they're AI tools to detect AI. So like if somebody submits a paper that they wrote, they didn't write themselves, that they have tools that can determine, they didn't write it. But then they've had some proof that those were off. And so I think it's a very interesting way of looking at it. But I do believe that it's not something we can ignore and say AI is we're losing our ability to think, so we don't want to use it anymore. Because if we do, then we're going to miss it because there are others that use it. We got to figure out how to harness it and use it appropriately, I guess, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Yep. Just like any other technology. And if you look back at all the pieces about technology and the major concern in the Army about technology is technology can never replace the human in the loop, right? It can never replace the decision maker. And that's the concern with a lot of these autonomous systems. I think I was reading online a couple days ago that, that the Army's getting rid of some combat aviation platforms because it thinks it can solve those things with automated pilots, right? And so, what's the blend? How do you create that? How do you replicate that kind of, that stealth movie where you have one pilot who's a computer and another pilot who's human, right? So, I mean, it's going to be an interesting interwar period, I think, right now. Like transformative in a lot of ways.
It sure is, no doubt about it. I tell you, we January we had our first and only grandbaby was born.
Oh, wow.
Logan Presley Kennedy is almost 9 months old now, or getting close to it, and I just think about what's the world like? What's Logan's world looks like? These young, our kids and grandkids as they grow up, and how are we going to be able to leverage technology for good as opposed to, I don't know what you trust online anymore nowadays, Brian. I just look at something, I read something, I say, well, that sounds kind of interesting, but is it true? And the Russians, mis and disinformation is scary. And wasn't there, I'll give you an example. Who was it, the young Ukrainian refugee that was stabbed was it in Charlotte?
Oh yeah, in New York, on the subway, right?
Yeah, stabbed to death by a guy that lost his mind. And just think about that and how the Russians could use that a Ukrainian refugee can't be safe in the United States and can spin that. And it's just how do we detect that and how do we combat it and in our own way. It's fascinating, the cyber aspect of that domain and how it influences the fight.
All right. Any other questions out there from the Writing Roundtable?
I have a question, sir. So I have a 2-month-old. She keeps trying to make an appearance today. By the way, so congratulations on your grandbaby.
Thank you.
I had a question with your organization that you're part of, the Troops Tomorrow. I Googled you online and I saw that you were part of it. It's like basically an ROTC at the University of Minnesota. And I'm noticing, the reason I bring this up is that I'm noticing in looking at younger officers, I was born before internet and went to school before internet, but none of these, some of these younger officers, they've only known internet and, AI and these things. How do we keep them motivated to not only want to write, but also to want to read? Because I notice, the poor quality in some of these officers' work. And I think it comes down to they have no interest in reading anymore because they can just go swipe on, TikTok and all these other things. And so they just can't focus as much. How do we combat that with our younger audiences and keep them motivated to want to read and write?
Yeah, I tell you that is a very good question and a challenge that we got to think through in the future. And I'm just wrestling with it right now because I think, because what I'm just trying to figure out is how to frame what you said, because I think what they think is there's shortcuts to that. How can I just, rather than reading, let's see, which one did I have out here that I want to show you? This Kind of War by Fehrenbach, which is a classic about the Korean War that I had to read before I became the J3 at USFK in Korea. It's fascinating, the things you can learn from that. And so how do we make sure people understand that you need, and by the way, there's some relaxing aspects of it as well. You can actually sit down and read. Although, Audible works too. You can get a whole book on Audible if you want to run 20 miles or whatever the heck it is. But I think we just got to continue to push it. Establish reading lists. I don't know if y'all know General Milford Beagles. He was the CAC commander at Leavenworth. He just retired, and he would. The way he would do it is, I got something here. I played, like, he would make these reading lists, different books and different categories, and he would push that at ILE and at pre-command course at Leavenworth for people to think about. And then, you can do that by one of the things that I had a boss one time that said, okay, this quarter our book is going to be X, and we would all read it and periodically meet and either discuss chapters or discuss the book after we were complete. That may be one technique to get people to read more. Of course, they can still go online and get a summary, but I mean, maybe if you do it by chapter, it's a little bit harder to do that. You know, the Cliff Notes were pretty cool to me when I was in college, but that was pre-internet, Mr. Gagnon, so I don't, Roger all, but struggling with that. But I do believe just the ability to push the importance of reading and maybe have some structured reading program can help with that.
I would add on to that, sir, too, just like what we're doing today, modeling, right? You know, so a lot of people want to be successful or in the organization. And when they hear senior leaders like General Bolin, yourself, you know, General Trout, General Seltzer, all these different folks in the Texas Military Department, then they hear about, you know, they see how successful they are and they got to the position, they got to the top. Well, how did you get there? Well, they were doing it by reading, by writing, you know, by dialogue, by these things that kind of help, you know, build that culture that Sergeant Major Warfield was asking about, building that culture of, it's almost like, you know, I guess it was a catchphrase a couple of decades ago, but a learning organization. You kind of want to create that learning organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a great amplification, Brian. For sure. Do you look at many, you know, I'm trying to figure out building a worldview. You know, we talked about that a lot in the War College. What is your worldview, and how do you inform that through not just reading books, but also podcasts and other things? You know, there was one I wanted to recommend to you. I don't know if y'all ever watch Goodfellas. Goodfellas is out of Stanford. And it's a podcast they do, I think, once every month or two. And it's got Nels Ferguson. You know, he's a Harvard background, but he's a Brit, Sir Nels, and he's a historian. But you also have H.R. McMaster on there, and then there's one other one that's an economist, and I think they have a really interesting worldview, and it's interesting to listen to them to inform. I think they lean a little bit more conservative, but you can find some of them that are, if you want to balance out. You know, Ian Bremmer's G0 is another good one that I listen to. And David Brooks is good too, and he talks about a lot about things. He talks about AI. You know, we were talking about the value of AI and some of the things he's concerned about, because he doesn't think that you can really model emotion as much, and that's hard to do in decision thought. And it was pretty interesting because the guy that was interviewing him went through ChatGPT and said, "Write me a paper on a certain topic as if David Brooks would write it." And then he was reading passages, and it was pretty good. I mean, it's like, Lord, it's scary. But
it's crazy. Well, hey, sir, we're at the top of the hour, so you know, we do this the lunch hour for these guys, so they can. But we're so appreciative that you made time for us today, and you know, definitely thankful for everything you contributed today. We got some great notes, some great takeaways. So I'll leave it. I'll leave it to you. Any closing comments? Any parting words you'd like to send out to the audience?
Yeah. Hey, just thanks for the opportunity. It's always an honor to talk to soldiers and to keep my 61-year-old soldier spirit charged. And like I told you, I'm a task force Arrowhead. I'm a member of your team and always will be. And if you ever want me to do something else or to look at something, and then if I had something that pops up that I think this group would like, and I just send it to you, Brian, or to Matt, whether it be an article or some sort of website thing that I think is powerful. Yeah. And then with that, I also want to thank you for your service and leadership. And like I told you up front, I have a huge appreciation for the Army National Guard. And there is no way in hell we could ever fight anywhere, large-scale combat ops, or even anything globally without the National Guard. And so you're invaluable to our protecting our nation. As I said, never before has such a large responsibility rested on the shoulders of so few. So thank you for your service and leadership.
Well, thank you very much, sir. We're signing off.
Absolutely. All right. Y'all take care. Pass my regards to Brad Bolin. I think I got a text.
We'll do, sir. We'll do.
All right. Take care.